Today on With the First Pick, we're here at the University of Miami. More importantly than Cam Ward, got my guy Ran Carthon here, former Titans general manager. Ran, how does it feel to be on the media side after years on the NFL side?
So when you just said here with the first pick, I thought you were talking about me.
You are the first
but
pick. Look, there's no
you
doubt about it.
transitioned and went to Cam. No, this is cool, man. This is looking forward to it, especially being able to work with a person like yourself, and
we'll
just here to learn. Yeah, for now, we'll see.
That's right. It's early in the relationship. It's just like the first.
It's
date.
the honeymoon phase.
That's right, absolutely. But I'm super pumped to have you here. Our mutual friend Jonathan Jones is a big Ran fan. He was talking you up from day one, so I'm pumped to see how this unfolds, and I'm happy for us that you are happy to be on the media side. The last GM that we had here said he wasn't going back, and he left. So hopefully you're.
I talked to Rick earlier.
Rick gave you the lowdown on what to expect. But we're going to see a lot more Ran, so I'm super excited to see how all that unfolds because wealth of knowledge. You played at almost at Georgia. You played at Florida.
No, never lost to Georgia.
Played at Florida, never lost to Georgia. He's not a big fan of the U. I'm gonna be honest with you.
I never wore the lanyard. I don't know if you noticed that or not.
He didn't, Gigi. He didn't wear it. There you go. You learned a few things. But also, if you haven't seen it after you watch this, go to YouTube and check out Rand's interview with Cam Ward because he has a special relationship with Cam, and he got to talk with him right after the pro day, and that's well worth your listen. But obviously, we were here for Cam Ward, but there are other guys here that are going to get drafted: Elijah Arroyo, Xavier Restrepo. The kicker, Andy Borregales, put on a show early on. I'd never been to a pro day, and you've been to thousands more than me, where the kicker started things off. Is that something you've seen before?
No, that's kind of foreign.
Yeah.
But it's a testament to the young man and what he's capable of. And
he was
has several special teams coordinators out here. Most notably, Darren Rizzi, who's one of the best in the league and was very instrumental in creating that new kickoff rule.
Right.
Spearheading that. So to have a guy like Rizzi here to see you, it means a lot.
Oh, he stood up. We can't start with the kicker. Folks will get mad at me. We got to start with Cam Ward because I'm trying to say this is my third year doing the pro day circuit with the podcast and with CBS Sports, and I've been to Bryce, CJ, Will Levis, and you were at all three of those.
Yep.
And then the next week was Anthony Richardson. That was 2 drafts ago. Last year we were at Jaden Daniels, and then the next day was Drake May. This was, and it may not be close, the cleanest workout I've seen from the quarterbacks of that group that I'm talking about. And I was surprised in person. Cam has got a big boy arm. Like, it is legit. There are no questions about the arm strength. I remember being at CJ's pro day and then Bryce's pro day thinking these guys have NFL arms. They can make the throws, but this is a different level. And I don't think it's that far behind Will Levis and Anthony Richardson. You can give me your perspective on all the physical stuff that Cam did today, and then obviously we can talk about him as a person too.
Yeah, I think he did a really nice job of throwing the ball, and I think him and his quarterback coach, Darryl Colbert, they did a really good job of scripting the throws and showing what he's capable of doing. I think one of the things that stands out with Cam when you first watch him is his quick release. And, the varying arm angles and, in which he can throw the ball. And I think all of that was on display today. Did a really nice job of throwing on the move. You saw some cross-body throws. You saw some rolls to the left where he was completing it on time and did a really good job anticipating routes, for his guys and just putting them, on the money. And so, really, really impressive pro day. Like you said, it was clean. It was smooth, the footwork. The platform, the base in which he threw, and just the way the ball jumps off his arm, it's live. And what you don't really get to see on the tape, and you get to see it in person, is the power that's behind it and his body structure. He was 219 at the combine, didn't weigh in today, but I'll go out on a limb and say he's between 223, 224, and you could feel the strength in his body as he was throwing today.
Let me ask you about that. We can talk as much or as little about the no weigh-in portion. 2 years ago, you were at the Ohio State Pro Day, and that might have been my first pro day ever. And I remember being in the weight room when players get weighed, and DeJuan Jones said, "I'm not getting weighed." And I'd never heard people laugh at that before because it was so rare. Cam decided not to get weighed, and it was sort of a thing, but maybe not. As an evaluator, do you care that you're not following the rules? Is it one of those things that you ask him about later if you have a chance to interview him on a 30 visit? Like, what's the feeling if you're an evaluator trying to draft a quarterback to be your franchise and he doesn't do something that historically everyone's done?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily have a problem with it.
Yeah.
First and foremost, but then there are ways to get his weight. Like you said, if he comes
right.
in for your 30 visit, you can ask him to step on the scale. Some of these teams are sticking around here in South Florida to do a private with him. And you could always get the weight at the private workout. So for me personally, it wouldn't have bothered me as much, especially knowing that he was 219, at the combine, and you could tell that he's filled out, a little bit. And 219 is actually probably light for him.
Yeah.
And so you could look at him and tell he's in that 220 range, and so I wouldn't have had a problem with it.
Right. He looked to be in pretty good shape, just seeing him walk by. I thought he actually looked a little thicker. I was at the Syracuse-Miami game at the end of the season back in November because I just wanted to see him in person, and obviously they were playing Kyle McCord. I wanted to see that matchup, and I thought he looked a little thicker than he does even now. And look, the other thing is completely different than DeJuan Jones, who's going to play offensive tackle, and you want to know whether he's 420 or 375. And when you say actively, I'm not going to weigh, you immediately have questions, even though it turned out he weighed 380 or something. So
and also some of the rules, if we're being honest, some of the rules don't apply to quarterbacks.
Yeah, that's right.
There are just certain things that is anybody going to care that the quarterback didn't do the three cone or the short shuttle. Just some rules just don't apply to that position.
Or the bench press. Like, what are we doing?
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So it feels like he's going to be the first quarterback taken, and it feels like he's going to be the first overall pick. I don't think that's any huge secret. I don't know what would have had to happen today other than his arm falling off for that to change, because he checked every box. And it such a good workout ran that even though they made us wait 8 hours to get to the quarterback,
that's a whole other story.
If he had done poorly or even average, I think it would have been a bigger story because people were like, all right, what are you waiting around for? He put on a show no matter whether he did it at 8 a.m. or 8 p.m.
No, I agree. And like you said, it's I think he really did himself well, especially not having thrown at the combine. And so today was pretty much his first and only public throwing session that we'll get to see, out of him until he's drafted and we're at practice and watching him throw the ball around in rookie minicamp. But like I said, he'll have some private workouts here with teams, I imagine, in the top 5, and so they'll get a chance to see him a little bit more. But he did a really nice job today, did really well for himself, and I think he solidified his position in the draft.
Hey, let me ask you this, because this was a conversation last year with Caleb, lesser degree with Jaden, maybe a little with Drake. He was so young, but Caleb played a lot of hero ball because he had to at USC behind that offensive line, which wasn't great at times. And it felt like it took about 2/3 of the season in Chicago to sort of figure out that he had to play on time and be more consistent. And the offensive line had issues as well in Chicago, and they've tried to address that. What are some of the things that Cam needs to work on? Because he can hero ball it up with the best of them. We've seen that, and he's gotten better at it. I thought over the last half of this season with Miami, he was a little more a little tighter in terms of ball out on time. But what does he need to work on if you're sitting in a draft room saying, okay, we're going to take him, but these are the things our coaches have to make sure they make him do?
I think it's what you kind of alluded to, just throwing on time, being consistent throwing on time. As you know, in the NFL, those throwing windows get significantly smaller. The pass rush is faster. And so, he's going to have to consistently work on being, tight with his platform and the base in which he's throwing from and just getting the ball out on time. Those are little things that he can fix, pretty quickly. And, that the NFL teams are they're going to hone in on that position. And, some of these quarterback coaches are phenomenal at what they do. And these guys have outside, quarterback coaches that they work with. And so if you can get – in a perfect world, you'd like to have Team A's quarterback coach connected with your off-site quarterback coach.
Okay.
So those fundamentals and things that you like to see in your system will transfer.
Right.
And you usually will see those things corrected pretty quickly.
And we know who Cam is physically through watching him for the last 4 years. And you know him quite well. I've talked to him once at the Combine and seen some of the interviews. He feels like a young man with an edge in the sense that if he throws an interception, he has a short memory like a cornerback does when he gets burned. And that feels invaluable because sometimes you draft these players and you don't know what it's going to look like until they get out there. And sometimes they're not the guy you thought they were because above the neck, they're not who they physically everyone can do it. Speak to Cam's mental toughness, at least my perceived version of that, and how that's going to help.
I think it starts at home and the family that he comes from. Like we talked about when we sat down with him a little bit ago, you have 2 cousins who've played in the NFL, Quentin Jammer and Quandre Diggs, who are highly, highly competitive guys, and he's a highly competitive guy. But then you think about what you were saying about some of these quarterbacks who've never really faced adversity, until they're struggling or they're throwing an interception or a sack, forced fumble type situation. But you look at his story, he had 1 offer coming out of high school. playing in a wing T offense, that's the start of dealing with adversity, and then having to go to Incarnate Word, from there to Washington State to, here to University of Miami. So he's dealt with change. He's dealt with things not being in his favor, and at each one of those stops, he's responded. So I think mentally he's only wired one way, and he's hyper competitive, and he's going to maximize that. And you see it and you feel it the moment you sit down and you talk to him and you get him to talking about ball. You see how highly competitive he is.
And, again, another reason to go watch that interview that Ran did with Cam is because you showed him some pictures from when he was growing up at different phases, and you asked him, could you ever imagine that if I told that younger version of you that you would be a likely first overall pick? And he was honest. He said, when I was younger, probably not. I probably thought I would get drafted somewhere. But once I got to high school and college, I was like, yeah. And that speaks to sort of the confidence you build as you get older and get more comfortable with your body. We're going to take a quick break, but before we do, I want to ask you this quickly. You don't have to name names, but have you ever had a guy come into a room and everyone's like, okay, this is our dude, just based on the conversations, and then once you get him into the building full time, it's like, oh no, he pulled a fast one on us. Like it just didn't work out mentally.
Yes, I've been in that scenario.
So we can fall in love with the wrong people.
Yes, but here's the one thing I always say: there are two positions in your building that, no matter if you know anything about football or whatever, when these two people walk into the room, your eyes should gravitate towards those people because they should have that it, and that's your head coach and your quarterback.
Yeah.
And if those two people have it, you feel it, and it permeates throughout the building. So, but yes, you can see it because some guys have in their mind on what a quarterback should be and how a quarterback should behave. But it's a totally different thing when that pressure is rolling and it's real, and those bullets are flying and you can't respond.
Absolutely. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about some of the other guys who had big days here today and are going to be drafted 31 days from now. That's when the actual draft is. We'll talk about that right after this.
Guys, can you feel it? Legends were born here. History was made here. These are hallowed grounds.
Hallowed grounds? The NCIS squad room?
Well, I wasn't talking about that, but I was talking about Augusta National.
All right. It's finally time for the Masters. I hear it's a tradition unlike any other.
All right, Ran. Cam crushed it. I mean, you couldn't have done better on the final exam than what he did today, and you can stack him up with a lot of guys. It's funny, before we talk about some other guys, I'm going to give you my list of how I rank the draft class at quarterback the last 2 years coming into today, and it might change. And then you tell me if you agree or disagree. So Caleb's still number one for me. We draft put all the 24 class and 25 class
now,
together.
hold on. Don't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, no.
But when you say ranking them, are we talking college film?
Yeah, we're ranking them based only on their college film
gotcha.
coming into the draft. Okay. No, that's a good point. So Caleb's still number one for me. Jaden's still number two. I had Drake 3. And Penix 4. I think I get accused by my colleagues of falling in love. Okay, so here it is. I'm doing Caleb. I'm doing Jaden. I'm moving Cam to 3. I don't care. Based on college film and pro day. You've got to add the pro day in there. Drake, Michael, Michael Penix Jr., J.J. McCarthy, and then Bo Nix, based on what I thought coming out.
The only one I feel you left off was C.J.
No, we're only doing last 2 years.
Oh, last 2.
Yeah,
okay.
You're right. Yeah, C.J. would certainly be up there. So just last 2.
So I can agree with your top 3.
Cam as high as 3?
Yeah, I could go there. Like you said, to me, watching Caleb coming out, and you don't want to throw this around, so please don't crush me on this, but he had some Mahomes-esque type of things about him coming out, and then I think Jaden was just so unique, in what he was able to do. Now, we've seen dual threat guys before.
He feels different.
But he felt different. He felt more like a natural passer of the football, because there is a difference between being a passer and a thrower. And he felt more of a natural passer who also had the gifts to be able to run.
And our colleague Pete Prisco, you used to call him your colleague now, Arizona State alum, he made the point that no player that he can remember, he's been covering the league for 30-plus years, made as much progress over the course of their college career as Jaden did last year, coming from Arizona State, transferring to LSU and doing what he did. And that felt different as well. But, all right, my rankings weren't terrible.
Yeah, it's not bad.
I tell you what, this GM, Scott, is a lot nicer than the previous GM. He said and just crushed me nonstop. I had no
Rick, I had nothing to do with this, man.
All right, let's talk about some of the other guys. And let's start with Xavier Restrepo, whose tape, there's not a football player I would want more on my team than Xavier Restrepo, given the way he plays, a slot receiver. And he ran a 6.85 3-cone, which I'm all down for. And then prior to that, he ran a 4.8 change 40. And I said to you, you just can't run the 40. Like, if you know that you're going to run that 4.8 as a wide receiver, if you don't run it, you might get drafted. If you do run it, there's a chance you might not get drafted. Is that fair?
No, that's fair. But also, one of the things that we judge and grade, in a draft room is we call play speed. And so if you remember, not comparing them to, but Jerry Rice, 40-wise, was a 4.6 guy.
Yeah. But
you ask and you poll any corner of that time, and they'll tell you when the ball was in the air, Jerry was one of the fastest people on the field. So, sometimes you can overtrain for these things.
That's a good
and
point
be in
too.
your head and be tight and tightly wound. But like you said, the biggest compliment you could give a guy like Restrepo is that he's a football player. And I think if you write that in your report that this guy's a football player, whether you take him 5th overall or in the 5th round, you want football players on your team. And like you said, he's a guy that you love to have on your team.
And then he goes out there and during the passing session and the route running session and does what he did every Saturday since he's been here. And I think that's what you have to remember. I would take him on my football team all day long and not think twice about it. Do NFL teams have access to the GPS practice data for these guys?
I mean, if you have contacts within the building, you can get that. And I'm sure these guys have gotten what the GPS times were. However, you have certain metrics for certain positions. So you understand that a guy playing in the slot may not be a burner downfield. I mean, how many times are you going to see a slot receiver up? You'll see him up the seam or,
Brian Thomas Jr., and that's it.
However, you focus on those guys 3-cone and their short shuttle. And do they have the lateral separation, the lateral quickness, the short area burst to get in and out of things to create that separation underneath on the money downs? And so as long as he continues to do that, no matter where he's drafted, he'll find a home in the NFL.
And again, and you can tell me from your trained up, but he looked sharp in terms of running those return routes and the underneath routes that he was so good at Miami. And again, the 3-cone 6.85, we can live with that all day long, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about the tight end, Elijah Arroyo, who is bigger in person than I thought, and he is a grown man even though he's 20, 21 years old. I'm not sure. Shoulder injury, I think, is what he's fighting through. He did come work out in the receiver tight end passing drills. I thought he looked pretty sharp. Did you notice anything that stuck out to you just from a scout's perspective?
No, I mean, it's like you said, he's an athletic guy. I don't think people realize how fast he is, straight ahead running. Because he's got some gas.
Yes, he does.
And so he's a guy that kind of, watching his tape kind of puts me in the mind of a Jordan Reed type of guy that can, that's the similar size, that has that what you call that basketball frame, and I just think he just understands how to get open. And the big thing that you see that's evolving in this league is guys that can do something with the ball in their hands. And he's one of these, new age tight ends that you get him the ball and he can make things happen.
Right, and you talk about new age tight ends. You have guys like him. You have guys like Mason Taylor at LSU, Jason Taylor's son. Colston Loveland is a freakish athlete at Michigan, and it was hard to see at times this year because the quarterback play wasn't where it was in previous years. And then Tyler Warren feels like the most old school throwback tight end, and he's a fantastic athlete too. I know his high school basketball coach, and he played center at 6'6", 235, and he was one of the reasons they were as competitive as they were. So it does feel like the tight end. Like, who was your tight end in Florida?
When I played?
Yeah.
Ben Troop.
Oh, well, he's sort of a new age tight end for that time, too. Okay.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's not a good example.
But we had Ben Troop and we had Aaron Walker, who was more of a Y blocking tight end.
Traditional guy.
And he played a little bit in the league, had a cup of coffee. But Ben was a second-round pick, freakish athlete. I think Ben was probably most known for hurdling tacklers. That was his signature move.
Yeah.
But he was a freakish athlete. I want to say Ben was a second-round pick himself.
Yeah. I mean, I should have thought that one through before I asked that question. So also here, Jacoby George. He's an undersized wide receiver, 5'11", I think 175-ish is what he weighed in at. I think he's probably a late day 3 guy just because of the size, but he's a dog too. He plays with some edge. And then Sam Brown Jr., we were talking about him before, West Virginia, Houston, and then transferred here, 6'2", 200, ran into the 4.4s, had a 41-inch vertical at the combine. He tweaked his hamstring. I was talking to his agent before, and you mentioned that he didn't finish the workout with the receivers and the quarterback. So just some other names that are potential draft picks. And let me ask you this, Ran, when you're looking at guys that are potentially drafted later in the process, day 3 guys, it feels like all 32 boards are going to be different because you're looking for different things, and you have different indicators of what you're looking for. What are you eyeballing among guys that aren't the Cam Wards or the Elijah Arroyos or even the Xavier Restrepos in terms of just that might catch your eye, that might be of interest to you?
Scheme fit.
Okay.
Scheme fit. Those day 3 guys are all about who fits your scheme the best. And you look at the work we did in San Francisco and the success that we had in rounds 5 through 7. Dre Greenlaw, Talanoa Hufanga, Jawan Jennings, Diamador Lenore, like all these guys eventually became starters, in that system because they were exact scheme fits for what you want to do. And you're not so much as chasing the height, weight, speed guy who may not have necessarily produced in college. You're going after the guy that I would dare to call the big ugly, who
those guys are, not to interrupt you, but those guys are all football players.
Absolutely, and they may not pass the eye test, like you said. Restrepo running a 4.84.
Yeah.
Some teams will say, doesn't have the speed, but there's a team out there that's like, man, he's our perfect slot receiver,
right? That
can get open and start for us. And so you're looking for those guys that fit the scheme. So that's why I say day 3 is a real focus on your scouts, on your area scouts, and your coaching staff. How well those guys can work together to identify the players that fit your scheme perfectly and what you want them to do.
When did you start? When was your first scouting? What year was that? When you first started scouting in the league?
First year scouting was 2008 in Atlanta.
So 2008.
Under Thomas Dimitroff.
And I say that because I've been covering the draft for CBS since 2018, so 10 years after you started. And the reason I mention that is because I loved Talanoa Hufanga coming out of USC, but I was so early on that I didn't trust myself because other people, and I don't know if you experienced this as a young scout, okay, well, I don't want to be on an island on day 1, and then I get this wrong. It's lonely. And I remember thinking, this guy, he's just a good football player. He's always around the ball. He's popping people in the mouth. I think his 3-cone wasn't great. He may not have run super fast, but he balled out. And then, to your point, you knew exactly how to use them. Was that Robert Saleh maybe still at DVC then?
Was it? I want to say it was D'Amico. I want to say it was D'Amico's first year because we drafted him. He was inactive. I want to say he may have even gotten hurt and missed some time.
Yeah.
And then the second year he came back. He won a starting position. I want to say he was all-pro in his second year.
And then another guy they drafted this year, and you've since been long, but it felt like a great fit, Malik Mustafa out of Wake. I didn't love him at Wake, and I thought he's a little stiff. And then I'm watching him in the fall, and he's just destroying guys. And I think that's the other story. Just because you see someone when they're 19 or 20 and they had a bad Saturday, that doesn't define who they are because they're going to get stronger, faster, potentially smarter, and they can be a different player, and that's something else you have to figure out.
Yeah, and I always say, you got to think about it. These kids are still growing into what I call their grown man body.
Right.
You're, like you said, 18 to 21, you're in college, and you get some of these rookies that are 20.
Which is crazy.
Which is crazy. You can't buy a drink, you can't rent a car, but you're playing in the highest league in the world. And we're expecting them to be top-notch, and they need time to grow.
And you have girls, I don't have girls, but I have 2 boys, and they are dumb as teenagers. So and that's just everybody, not just them especially. Every boy between age 18 and 24-ish, they need some guidance.
See now, because my boys are 6 and 8.
So you're fine.
Fine. For now. So now I'm not looking forward to those teenage years, the dumb years.
They're smarter at 6 and 8 than they are when they get to be teenagers when they find out about girls and other stuff. I'm trying to think. That's other than the kicker? I already mentioned the kicker at the top, which is not the best way to do things. But, he's getting drafted. I would imagine Borregales banging 65 yards like it's his job. We know about Cam. He's going to be the first overall pick. If you don't want to say it, I'll say it. I can't imagine a scenario where that doesn't happen. And then we'll find Xavier Restrepo. I would draft him. My job won't be on the line for me to say that either way, but he's a football player who's going to give you everything he has, and if he's patrolling the 20 yards from the line of scrimmage, he's going to win more times than not, I feel like.
Yeah.
And then there are going to be guys like Jacoby George and Sam Brown Jr. that we talk about that have a chance to. And to your point, that just depends on scheme fit. And part of that package, I would imagine, is if you have guys graded the same on day 3, scheme fit-wise, if you're getting silly off the field, that makes it a lot easier to make a decision about a guy who's doing what he's supposed to be doing.
Now, here's what I'll say, too, and his name is slipping me. I see him in my head. But I think us as scouts, we overthought the Clemson slot receiver that the Raiders drafted, I want to say in the 5th round. His name is –
Oh, no, wait. Not Jacoby Myers.
No.
Jacoby went to NC State.
He played with Deshaun Watson at Clemson. He was the starting slot receiver.
Hunter Renfrow. Oh, yeah.
And so I'd be interested to know what Renfrow ran in the 40 versus what his 3-cone and short shuttles times were.
That's a good point.
And
We'll
how they measure up with Restrepo.
Shout out to Stryker for knowing Hunter. He's a huge
Shout out
Hunter
to Stryker.
Renfrow fan.
Came out of there quick.
He came out of there quick. That's it. That's another great point because Hunter dominated in college.
And was successful in the league.
And he was successful in the league. I don't think he played last year, but he was successful early on to the point. And this is the other thing. Sometimes we fall in love with these guys, not just wide receivers, in the early rounds, and then it's the guys in the middle to late rounds that are the most productive. Jacoby Myers, who I thought you were talking about, went to NC State, didn't run extremely fast. Great career in New England, parlayed that into a strong career with the Raiders. And I think sometimes – let me ask you this before we get out of here. If the draft were held 2 days after the Super Bowl, do you think we'd make better decisions? Like
No.
less time to overthink it?
No.
You think we need this time?
I think we need this time just based on – you got to understand specifically for the underclassmen, this is Scout's first time actually meeting them and talking to them. And the tape work is done. Right? Before the Super Bowl, the tape work is done. Everyone used to have December meetings. Some teams have evolved now to have January meetings to give your scouts a little more time to see some late tape. But I think you need this time of year to really get to know the person. Because it's like you talk to these kids, you're like, hey, man, if I'm investing millions of dollars into you, I want to know I'm getting the right person. The player stuff, I can go back and watch tape until I'm blue in the face.
Yeah.
But how many interactions do you get with that person one-on-one?
That's a good point because the tape is not the issue. That you have to know could be your future partner for the next 4 to 10 years, depending on.
So the person and the medical.
Right. That's right.
You know, the medical, because these are things that you don't get to see. You see guys that show up and play, and you never missed a game in college, but you don't know that they don't practice on Monday and Tuesday. Right. They're on a pitch count, or they can't load weight on their back because they have. These are all things that that feed into the decision that you have to make.
No, that's
so you need this time of year.
That's important, and I'm glad you pointed that out because I feel like sometimes we overanalyze these guys so much that we talk ourselves. And I talk to guys, scouts that say sometimes we can convince ourselves of things.
Yeah.
Sort of like the conversation about I thought that was the guy, turns out it wasn't the guy. But it feels like more human error.
Now, if you really want to push it, the question would be, should you have the draft before free agency or after?
That would make it more interesting from a strategic perspective. I would imagine teams would not like that because you have to, and that would give more leverage to the agents and the free agents in terms of you got to pay them more too, right? Because if you don't feel a quarterback need and Aaron Rodgers is sitting out there.
But I think going into free agency, what's readily available to you.
That's true.
And I think everyone likes to throw around the draft and develop like this is something new. Like this has been since the beginning of the draft, like you draft players to develop them.
Right.
And I think if you had a better chance to draft a guy, then now you'll know where the other holes were that you need to fix via free agency.
That's
just a conversation to have. I don't know.
That actually it makes me wonder if you would take a developmental quarterback or a quarterback in the first round. Maybe you draft a quarterback higher than you might otherwise, fifth-year option, whatever. You take him at 27 instead of 45. With the understanding that I'm going to sign Russ Wilson or whomever in free agency, Justin Fields, and not force this kid on the field. Because if you sign Justin Fields and Russ Wilson first, if you're the Steelers, well, you're not going to be out of the quarterback market unless something crazy happens and someone falls to you, talking about last year's class. No, that's interesting.
And it closes the gap because, so much can happen between now and 31 days from now.
Yeah.
As I lived through with the draft pick last year, and it ended up working out, fine. Things can happen that you can't predict, and so you're on pins and needles. Hence why teams like everyone in America knew Chicago was taking Caleb Williams, right. But you couldn't commit to it until you got to that day to make sure that everything is smooth and everything is above board when you get to that day.
Absolutely. All right, we're done here. It's been a long day.
Very long.
And these guys want to get out of here.
And you got to make sure your parking is on point.
My car might not be there, so I might be Ubering home a long way. So hit up the GoFundMe for me getting home. That's it from here from Coral Gables, University of Miami. Pro Day for Cam Ward and his teammates. A lot of fun. Great job doing this thing with Ran. We're going to be back tomorrow. So if you like this, come back tomorrow. We're going to do another podcast tomorrow. And we'll see you guys then.
See you.